Welcome to the DTC Insider Podcast, where online business owners come to find actionable tips and tactics to grow their businesses. Now, here's your host, Brian Roisentul.
Real quick before we continue with the episode, let me tell you something. If you own or work for a DTC brand and you're not hitting your revenue and profitability goals, you're not alone. Things are getting harder, and what used to work doesn't anymore. That's why it's important to find a business-oriented partner that's focused on improving the levers that will change the game for your business. And believe me, it is possible. At BSR Digital, to give you an example, we have recently helped our clients generate between, listen well, 80 and 700K in extra monthly revenue. If you'd like to explore how we could do the same for you and your business, head on over to bsrdigital.com and book a call with us. Hey, welcome to another episode. Today, I have the pleasure to interview Will Nitze. He's the founder and CEO of IQBar, America's leading brain and body nutrition startup. With minimal funding, Will has taken IQBar from 0 locations and 0 in revenue in 2018 to over 10,000 doors and a projected $50 million in sales in 2024. He's also the co-host of the Eating Glass podcast, so I'm sure this will be a really valuable episode for all of you guys listening or watching. Hey, Will, thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. As I told you offline, I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while. And for everyone listening or watching this, I would strongly advise you to do that. And of course, everything will be in the show notes, including his LinkedIn handle. But please, why don't you start by introducing yourself and IQBar as well?
Sure. Yeah, you're one of the few people who got my last name right. So yeah, my name's Will Nitze. I live in Miami with my wife. I studied psychology and neuroscience as well as political science in college. Took a job in software because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life outside of college. Did that for 3.5 years, and then I founded out of my tiny Boston apartment IQBar, which we've been at for about 7 years now. And what is IQBar? Basically, we are a brain and body nutrition platform. So obviously we do bars, that's the namesake of the company, but we also do hydration mixes and we do instant coffees. So the general idea is satiate, hydrate, caffeinate, and we cover all 3 of those bases. So yeah, that's a little bit about us.
And it's funny, I also have a background in computer science, myself at least, and I used to work as a developer for many years. And then I transitioned to marketing. I don't know why even, but I did it. So I wanted to ask about your why, how you got from, the computer science you said or something like that, to founding IQBar.
Yeah, and I wasn't coding. I was in sales and marketing. So I was brought into a team that was mostly management consultants at a pretty fast growing software startup in Boston right out of school. And all my friends were doing finance and consulting, and a couple of them went into tech, but I wasn't an engineer, and I knew I didn't want to do finance, and I knew I didn't want to do consulting. So I just sort of took the job by default because I didn't know, it was a job and I had to get a job. And I got really good at it. I was selling high ticket supply chain and ops software to oil and gas companies. So like $200,000 a year software packages to ExxonMobil. And I was spending a lot of time in Houston. So I was flying back and forth from Boston to Houston. And I got super knowledgeable about oil and gas. I got super knowledgeable about software and software as a service. And I got super knowledgeable about how a startup works. And it was a successful startup too. It ultimately sold for, I think it was $280 million. I didn't see any money of that, but it was cool to just see what a successful startup looks like. But I did not like oil and gas. I didn't really like software, and I didn't make any money. So I was like, okay, what do I like? And do I want to do my own thing? And if so, what would that be? And again, I said I wasn't an engineer. So I did determine that I'm going to set out off and do my own thing. And what is left there, it's really products, because I always wanted to make the thing myself. I didn't want to outsource the creation of the product I was going to sell. I wanted to own that process. And I also just love consumer goods. I always have. I enjoy going to a grocery store, or Home Depot even, or whatever. I like just like walking around aisles and looking at consumer products, everything from the packaging to the price pack architecture, why is this a 6-pack and that's a 1-pack, down to the product quality. So I'm just a nerd as it relates to products in general, and just sort of self-taught myself how to create a food product.
Remind me of my father. He loves going to the supermarket or anywhere like that and spends I don't know how much time on the aisles. And even as a kid, I was like, please, man, let's go play somewhere else. But yeah, I get your point. That's amazing.
Well, it
So
gets a lot cooler. It gets a lot cooler once you understand what it takes. Like, that end product looks so simple, right? You pull a can of Campbell's soup off the shelf, and before you're in consumer products, you're like, oh, that's just a can of soup. Once you know all of the things that went into getting that there, making it look the way it is, pricing it the way it is, it gets like way more fascinating.
you can see the matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. So both as a brand founder and a podcast host, and of course, I know that you have a lot of experience in the DTC space, and I love your take on what the heck is going on in the space, among many others. I mean, among many other spaces, right? It's not as isolated to the DTC space, but specifically, what do you think that brands are struggling with right now?
I mean, D2C was never meant to be a singular channel for a business. Like, a D2C business is not really a business. I mean, it is, literally speaking, but it's really meant to be a channel. And there was a period, in 2016, let's say 2017, 2018, where the paid ad setup was uncompetitive enough to where you could create a profitable, fast growing consumer good D2C business, and it could work. And there were the examples everyone talks about, like native deodorant, and that's great, right? But that was a moment in time, and that is not the norm. That's not how people shop, right? I think it's like 85 to 90% of all consumer good purchases are not done on a company's website. So, look at any market and say, oh, am I going to focus on the 10% area over here, or am I going to focus on 100%? And that 10% is super important, by the way. So we started D2C. We did a Kickstarter, and then we rolled that into a website, and then we layered on Amazon, and that was how we started. And still to this day, the majority of our business is e-commerce. So I say all of that with that in mind. Keep that in mind. But we always knew, like, there's no way to build a big food and beverage business via D2C. It's just not possible. I don't think I can think of a single example where that's happened. So it's a channel, right? And it serves its purpose. It's a billboard for their brand. It helps people educate themselves on the brand. You can generate, meaningful revenue on it, but it's never, for us, we've learned it'll never finance our business, and we'll never achieve the scale we want to through it. Now, what's happening in the, D2C space more broadly, I mean, I'm not a genius on that by any means, but I think it's the same thing everyone else is saying, right? Ads are getting harder to, customer acquisition cost is going up via meta ads and things like that. And there are pockets that are kind of exciting, like TikTok Shop. There are a few people who are just really doing well on TikTok Shop and acquiring customers quite cheaply, and that's awesome, right? But that's not going to last. Like, none of these things last. And so just my general philosophy is you have to be omni-channel to build a healthy business. So we have D2C, but we also have Amazon. We also have Thrive Market, which is a big marketplace in the US. We have Walmart.com. We have Costco.com. So even just within e-commerce, we have a diversified portfolio of of channels. And then more broadly, actually now I think it's at like 12,000 physical brick and mortar locations. So these are some of my thoughts on it.
I agree with everything you said. I've been discussing the same thing with many brands here on the show, and of course offline. For them, well, they share your same thoughts. But when it comes to the main customer acquisition channels, at least online for the DTC, it's still Meta. You know,
Yeah.
even companies like BattleBox. I recently chatted with John Roman here on the show, and he said, TikTok is not shining for us. And I attended a webinar on TikTok shops by him recently, and he said it here live. He's like, it's not shining for us this year. It comes and goes, but it's not there. Meta is still like the number one channel for us, and the same happens with many other brands. Is it the same for you guys, online at least?
Yeah, I think that definitely is the primary driver for D2C. Amazon is 4 times bigger than our D2C. So candidly, we spend a lot more time thinking about Amazon search advertising and Amazon DSP, display advertising than we do about Meta advertising, because it's just such a bigger revenue channel for us. But yeah, for D2C, Meta still is definitely number one, and we are not like great on I won't lie and say we've cracked the code on TikTok. I know several people who have to a degree, and we're trying to learn from them, and but it's just I operate on. But one of the beauties of being omni-channel is, let's say you have a set number of units of energy and also units of cash. And you can just look across your portfolio of revenue streams and say, where am I going to get the best return for one unit of energy and or 1 unit of cash? And very often, it's something like Amazon search ads over Meta ads driving to D2C. And so that's the beauty, right? So, because in other time periods, it might be Meta, and that's more efficient than Amazon. But we're always like re-auditing that, so that we can be most efficient as possible.
It's interesting, and I guess there must be something like balancing between the right now and the compound effect of the future effect of the current efforts, right? So that's probably something that brands should keep in mind. What do you think of that?
You're just asking, like, should you try to predict what will be useful in the future, as well as understanding what's right now?
Some actions, that will yield results immediately, and some actions, that probably will compound in the future. I don't know, Amazon.
Oh, totally. I mean, Amazon's a really interesting one, right? You just have to generate momentum, and it takes a long time. Like when we launch a new product line, we lose money or break even on that product line for at least a year, because we're dumping all of the money back into ads, and we're building up a review base, and we're trying to rank higher and higher and higher, and the ads are less efficient. But then you cross a threshold to where the ads start getting more efficient, and you start creating a flywheel, and your subscribe and save base starts growing. And so, yeah, I mean, there's tons of, we've now done it with 2 other categories, and we're on our 3rd category. So we have sort of a playbook that I hate the word playbook, but that's what comes to mind, that we ran for bars and then ran for hydration, and now we're running for coffee. And we just know it takes time to build up a business there. And there is a threshold where things start getting more efficient. It's very much a momentum-based thing, much more so than D2C and Meta.
So we just discussed about channels, how, the channels a brand like yours leverages, and the importance of having a healthy mix of them. Now I would love your thoughts on the metrics you are obsessed about currently, or obsessed with currently, and how that changed as the company grew.
Again, it's not that interesting. It's CAC to LTV is always going to be, like, we think a lot more about CAC than we do about ROAS, for example. So that really is like the primary one. We think a lot about subscriber base, and we think a lot about average order value as well. Which tie into lifetime value, but are useful to look at sort of in parallel to lifetime value. And we do a bunch of things to, part of the reason we launched hydration in addition to bars and then coffee in addition to bars and hydration is to increase average order value. So, and this is I think a fascinating topic because brands which most food and bev brands would fall into this bucket, that are brick and mortar first, because most people get food and beverage from grocery stores, wouldn't do what we did. They wouldn't move from bars to hydration to coffee. They seem totally different, right? But in an online context, it makes perfect sense because they're totally non-cannibalizing. You're not buying one instead of the other. You're buying one in addition to the other, and they complement each other. Ideally, consuming one actually it's synergistic. It makes you want to consume the other one more.
Like the skincare routine, let's say, it's not a substitute product, but it's something that can go together with the other.
Totally complements it, right? So in the morning you can have our coffee and a bar. It's like a beautiful thing, and hydrate, right? Because you're dehydrated when you wake up. So, because it's very hard to convince someone to buy $200 worth of bars, because that's just a lot of bars, right? But it's much easier to convince someone to buy $75 of bars and $60 of hydration and $75 of coffee. Just much easier. And so it just, that platformization helps us increase average order value, and it also helps us increase customer lifetime value, because when we sell someone something like an ultimate sampler, which has all three products, they might like two of them and not like the third, or they might even just like one of them. And so you have three at bats, you have three tries for that customer, and all you need to do is land on one of them. And if you land on two, I mean, that's incredible. So that platform really just works phenomenally well for e-commerce. Of course, it doesn't work in brick and mortar. So you have to have a totally different strategy in brick and mortar, and the category is shopped differently. The category managers care about different things, blah, blah, blah. But yeah.
Oh, besides the obvious pros and cons, you mentioned, for example, that having multiple product categories helps boost AOV and LTV. But I met, for example, some founders. One of them I remember here on the show was the founder of a brand called Anson Belt and Buckle. They sell only belts, or at the time of the interview, at least last year. They are an 80-figure brand selling only belts. And when I asked them, why don't you launch a complementary product or something like that, it's like, well, there are many cons, or of course there are many pros like boosting AOV, etc. But there are many cons to, like behind the scenes for brands that consumers don't see of having, different product categories. What were you thinking when
Definitely.
you launched those?
Totally. There's no free lunch. Like there's always going to be a downside to expanding anything, right? Even limited time offers, there's always going to be a downside. They suck to make, take like pumpkin spice. It's so seasonal. And if you make too little, you miss the opportunity. But if you make too much and you have pumpkin product in November and December, you're screwed because no one wants it, right? They've moved on to gingerbread or whatever. So it's yes, manufacturing challenges exist when you layer on new categories or products. I would say though, there's a way to do it, in less stressful ways. So for us, we moved into two separate categories, but they're both powders. So we manufacture both of them at the same facility, and we put them both into stick packs, and we merchandise them. So, the packs are very similar. So you can synergize multiple, so long as the form factor is the same, in that case, powder, you can have multiple categories that more or less you're taking all the same steps for, but that service totally different needs and even different consumers. So we kind of pulled it off to where we have three categories, but it's more or less the work of playing in two categories. The other thing is to constrain yourself in a go-to-market sense, constrain the channels you're selling through. So for bars, we sell totally omni-channel. We sell them everywhere, online, offline, etc. For hydration and coffee, we only sell them online. Well, we sell them in Vitamin Shop, one account, that's kind of an exception, but more or less we only sell them online. So that just massively reduces the pressure, because now you're not having to pitch to 3 different category managers at Kroger or Walmart or Costco or whatever. So there's a way to do it that is dramatically less stressful than effectively trying to create a new startup, because it is hard to create. You could, with each new category, effectively create a new company, and that's not sustainable. We look at it as like latch-ons, like incremental revenue and profit. And again, it synergizes like our ecosystem of product, and it keeps people coming back, and it keeps novelty. Because that's the other thing, right? People, especially in food and bev, want novelty. You might keep buying that same belt, but like you're gonna get tired of flavor. It's just, that's a real thing in food and bev. So you have to fight that too.
Yeah. Changing subjects a little bit, you recently had the pleasure of interviewing or having a call at least with it was the founder of RXBAR. Could you please tell me your main takeaways from it? I know based on, again, what you posted on LinkedIn, that it was a big deal for you. So yeah, what was your main takeaway?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, so I started this podcast more or less to just have fun and talk to really cool, impressive people and ask them questions that you otherwise wouldn't, would be awkward to ask them, which is, I'm sure, partially why you do your podcast. But so Peter Ray Hall, the founder of RXBAR, co-founder of RXBAR, he was like a hero to me when I was starting out, because I was starting a bar company, and that was like the mega exit of all mega exits of bar companies. And he sold it for $600 million to Kellogg's, and that was like right as I was starting, and I was like, that I want to be that. How do I get to that, and how do I work backwards from that? And that even influenced us naming our product IQBar, RXBAR, IQBar, right? So, it was just a very cool moment, because you're like, to a degree, meeting your hero, sort of. And it was a really interesting story. I mean, he's a really nuanced individual, had a really hard upbringing, and struggled with school, and never thought he was successful, but like built up this work ethic and this resiliency, and then just, so he's an interesting person, and his sort of philosophical thoughts are interesting. And then the product journey was interesting too, because they did so much that was different. They started in CrossFit gyms versus D2C, actually it was kind of D2C, but it was a unique flavor of D2C. It was like gyms would be ordering through their website to then sell to gym goers in CrossFit gyms. It was a super unique blend of a D2C business, and super uncompetitive. There were no other bars on the shelves. So selling to a CrossFit gym in North Dakota is better than selling to a Whole Foods in his backyard, for example, which is, I thought, just a fascinating dynamic. And then, but I would say the biggest takeaway was product market fit solves every problem. Because I was asking him, how did you do this without raising money? Because they really didn't even raise any money, which is crazy in consumer goods. I mean, we've raised close to $10 million, and we're super capitally efficient. So I was like, how the hell did you do this? And he's like, honestly, I don't know how else to put it other than extreme product market fit solves every problem. If product is just moving and removing and removing, and you meet the moment, because they were a paleo compliant bar when paleo was huge, and then Whole30 was huge, and he's like, it solves everything. Your product velocity goes up. You don't have to promo your products. You don't, word of mouth is huge. Your lifetime value is exceptionally large. Like, it was just the stars aligned. And so that just reinforced in my mind, people nerd out so much on things like customer acquisition cost and ad efficiency and this and that, and they don't think enough about their product. Like, what's the number one way to improve every digital metric is have a better product. That's the number one thing you can do. So I don't know. It was just a good reminder of that.
Like that. I use analogies for everything, and it's the number one reason my wife wants to kill me. Everything is an analogy for me. So, I started running marathons, I think last year. I didn't want to do it. My mom runs marathons and he said, okay, let's give it a try. And ended up joining a triathlon team. And anyways, I see that of course in every race there are elite runners. This could be this company, RXBAR. But then there's the rest of us, the mortal, human beings trying to run. And of course, I could still be ahead of many people and do a great time by the end of the marathon. However, probably I will never be that guy or woman from Ethiopia or whichever country because they have more training, whatever conditions, etc. So what's in it for the rest of us? What can we work with? Because timing, great product, everything, they had that. Do you think that today a company like yours, for example, can have that momentum? Otherwise, what else can you leverage to replace it?
I think it's just a magnitude thing. So, they had this mega exit and success, but even being 1/10 as successful as that is still a home run, right? It's not a grand slam, but it's a home run. So I think don't get caught up in looking at the grand slam and miss the fact that you can hit a home run. So, I mean, we do try to do the same thing they do. We think deeply about the moment we're in, what do consumers want? We talk to consumers all the time. Iterate, like a really, really important one is your product is never done. You might think your product's done and you might go and look at some, like I said, Campbell's soup sitting on the shelf. That product's not done. That product will be iterated on, even at that scale at Campbell's. They're going to tweak the salt a little bit. They're going to tweak the, sit time when they're cooking it from a minute 10 to a minute 15, et cetera, et cetera. There's always a way to improve your product by 1%, and it compounds over time. So again, I would come back to product. You asked, what can the rest of us do? We can obsess over product first and foremost. And then, just strap in for a longer journey. RXBAR did it in 4 years. Well, it might take you 8 years. It might take you 10 years. That's okay. That's okay. You don't need to be the wild exception. So there's just so many ways to be successful. I think you just, at the same time as having heroes and looking at case studies, you also have to run your own race and divorce yourself from that. That's not applicable to you. Happened in a different time, different era. Take CrossFit. A lot of people tried to do that same strategy and it didn't work because CrossFit changed and the diet of CrossFitters changed. And so never try to just carbon copy something someone else did, especially if it happened more than 2 years ago. The way society moves, how fast it moves and how fast consumer goods moves, that is a losing strategy. Like, you need to re-audit the environment every year, even. Think for us, keto was a big trend, and we have a really low sugar, low carb product, and keto happened in 2018, 2019, 2020, et cetera. And it was massive for us. And we sort of leaned into it. We had keto in big words, and it was super useful. And then keto just died. And all these brands that were married to keto, a lot of them had the word keto in their trademark, keto this, keto that. And they died because the trend died. But we just grew right through it because we were able to, we created products that were dynamic enough to ride trends and hop trends, but never to be married to a trend. The way you die is, one of the ways you die is you marry yourself to a trend that dies. And so there's 2 ways to win. There's be ultra focused and nail that trend and get in and get out before the trend dies, and which is high risk, high reward. I prefer the other path, which is create things that are super dynamic and can work in almost any environment while still allowing you to benefit from trends as they come and go. So I guess that would be another thing, is just think deeply about whether you want an ultra focused product or a more dynamic product. Again, there's pluses and minuses of both. There have been winners in both of those areas.
Yeah, and one thing is the product, as you said very well, and the other is the storytelling. I recently discussed that with Dylan Jones at Podium Nutrition. He said that
I know,
were,
Dylan.
yeah, they were doing, at Podium Nutrition, if I remember correctly, they were focused on CrossFitters. So we were speaking about, growing beyond a niche and how the narrative needs to change before product does, or before we need to change it. So he was explaining, he said it better than me, of course, but I'm trying to remember. He was saying something like, if you want to go from A to B, you need to start talking about B, teasing the market, throwing some things here and there, and start changing the storytelling before you actually want to do B, right? So yeah, it was a cool
Totally.
conversation around that. So
Yeah, and look at RXBAR. They crossed the chasm into the mainstream. Their early packaging was very CrossFit focused, and then they moved to the 3 dates, 4 egg whites, etc. And they jumped from CrossFit to the broader market. So even that case, they still had to cross the chasm into the mass market. So that's another thing I would obsess over, because generally speaking, you want to create a product for a niche, for a small group of people, but always be thinking two steps ahead. How am I going to cross the chasm into the broader mass market?
exactly. So talking about something related to what we were just talking about, growth in this era in 2024. You are, correct me if I'm wrong, in a journey of getting to $50 million in annual revenue. What's the main strategy to get there? Of course, high level for customer acquisition, customer retention, channel wise. What's the game plan?
Everything I said earlier. I mean, we are diversified across channels and products. So we need to win. The downside is you need to win in a lot of places, and the upside is it's like a diversified stock portfolio, right? Some will outperform others, and overall you're going to keep going up and to the right. So, we just have to pick the right channels and win with those channels. At the same time, you don't want to over diversify. So you might look at our business and say, whoa, they're trying to do too many things. Not really, actually. The 80-20 principle is definitely true. I mean, 20% of our channels, and then even 20% of our SKUs are delivering 80% of the revenue. And so we just think and obsess more heavily on those channels and those SKUs. So Amazon, D2C, Costco, Walmart, Sprouts, there's like 5 or 6 things that we spend pretty much all our time on. And, we still have a really nice business in all these other areas, but we're not going to spend a ton of time on them. So for us, it's just really executing in the channels we've chosen. And all the other stuff I said too, continue to iterate on offering and product. LTOs have been something we started last year that we were doing again this year and just works so well. I wish we had learned that even earlier in the journey. We have, and what's cool is we have 3 product lines. So we have all these different LTOs. We have on the bar side, pumpkin spice and gingerbread, and on the hydration side, we're about to launch raspberry lemonade as a summer flavor, for example. And then on the coffee side, pumpkin spice and peppermint mocha, right? So all of these things, like I said earlier, variety is what wins in food and beverage, and people love limited drops in food and beverage. And so does it suck operationally and manufacturing wise? Yes, but it just works every single time, especially if the product good, obviously. And so it's just like always keeping things fresh and novel. So yeah, it's all of those things though.
Amazing. One of the last questions I have for you. This one is personal. As a marketer and agency owner, what do you think the role of agencies and or marketers should be these days, um, to be, holding the hand of brands and helping them grow the right way?
I would just say, I mean, nothing revolutionary. I hold a special place in my heart for agencies because we've worked with some not so good ones, and then we've found really, really good ones. And a really good marriage between a brand and an agency, it can be pretty magical. Like what we have, for example, with our Amazon agency, effectively they're part of our team, and we just couldn't do what we do on Amazon without them. I would say probably the biggest thing is just like communication, clearly agreeing on what success looks like and what metrics you're optimizing for. I mean, on the brand side, I would say you can't let the agency dictate what they want to optimize for, right? You have to have your own opinion and say, this is what I think we should optimize for. And then the agency has to buy into that versus the other way around. And then you have to align incentives, or you don't have to. I think that's the best way to do it. Align incentives, and communication is just so key. I think a lot of the times when brands and agencies relationships blow up, it's because of lack of communication. They'll just fire an agency, it seems like overnight, and that could have been resolved if there had been more check-ins. And like on the agency side, if I ran an agency, I would reach out to brands way more often and not even be like, how's it going? I would say, what aren't we doing well? What is annoying about our service to you, or what are pain points? Like, it's the same. I would treat it the same way that I treat products and talking to consumers. You're not saying, oh, did you like it? You're saying, what would you change about it? Starting with the second sentence, not the first sentence.
Yeah,
And that's how you consistently improve a relationship or improve a product.
makes sense. Yeah. I was going to say something about the last thing you said and I forgot. But yeah, it makes sense, and it's something I get really often. And actually, it's not that hard. It's not about results. It's not about something that you can't control. It's something that is up to you. And yeah, I remember what you said by the end is that you get the answers to the questions you ask, right? So if you ask the right questions, you'll get the right answers, regardless of
And
what
the
you're doing.
bar is so low. The bar is so low. 90% of agencies won't ever do that. So like as a brand, if the agency does do that, I'm like, whoa, okay, they actually care. Like they're actually bought in, and et cetera, et cetera. It's not a high bar.
I agree. So the last question I have for you is, if you like reading, of course, do you have a book to recommend to the audience that you loved? It could be a business book, non-business, whatever you loved reading.
Yeah, I love many business books. The one that I've read that it's a little bit more philosophical, but he gets into entrepreneurship, but he also talks a lot about writing because he's a writer, which is War of Art by Stephen
Yes.
Pressfield. So good. It was such a quick read too, which I appreciate. I like books that are quick reads. I don't have time, I don't have a month to read a book. I want to crush through a book in a day. And it was just, I don't know, it was very philosophically validating for me. And it's basically like, you are destined to be something, and your job is to find out what that is. Your job is not to force yourself into some mold. And it's really all about the work, and whether benefits accrue by doing the work at a really high level, that'll happen or it won't, but it's about the work. Like don't say, oh, what industry has the highest average salary, and what's gonna help me get to the biggest exit, and this and that. Focus on the work, and whatever happens, happens. And find the right work that you were meant to do. And it just kind of focuses on that idea of like human work fit, kind of like product market fit. Like, what is the human work fit
Love that.
for you?
Yeah, I think I'm reading another book by that author, which is called "Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit." Is that correct? Is it the same
Yeah,
author?
yeah.
Yeah. but I will definitely give that one. I will read that one too. So, Will, it was amazing to have you here. As I said, I've been following you for a while, as I said in the beginning of the episode. So it's a true pleasure to have you here. Pick your brain. What you mentioned that during the interview about the reason for me to be doing these interviews is exactly that. They say, how on earth can I have great conversations with amazing people that otherwise probably wouldn't open the door to me, and it would be, as you said, weird to ask them questions like these ones. So I really, really appreciate your time. And I had a great time with you today. But before you go, could you please tell the audience where they can learn more about you and your company?
Sure. IQBar.com is our website. At IQBar is our social. You can find me on LinkedIn, Will Nitze, Nitze. I put out harebrained musings on a daily basis, and I think that's it. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you got the .com recently, right? IQBar.com. Before it
Yeah,
was
that was an interesting one because I was totally broke for so many years, and I think it was $6,800 or something when I started the company in 2018, and it was never worth it. I was not going to spend that. And then we ultimately bought it. I forget what the figure was. It was like 30 grand. Which you're like, oh, wish I had gotten it for this 6,800. But at that time, that 6,800 might as well have been 100,000.
yeah.
So yeah, good long-term move, but it's just nice to be able to say your trademark. It kind of sucks to have to be like, drink this or eat that or live that, I just IQBar.com. It's worth it.
It's a different feeling for sure. So thank you again for being here in the show, and for everyone listening to this, for watching this. Make sure to go to the DDCinsider.com/C/podcast. Everything will be there, and make sure to click on this episode, and you will find the show notes right there, including everything Will mentioned, and the book and the handles. Will, and again, thank you for being here. It was a pleasure.
Let's do it again sometime soon.
This episode was brought to you by BSR Digital. We help DTC brands grow through paid ads and email marketing campaigns. If you'd like us to help your business grow, head on over to bsrdigital.com and schedule a call with us.